Opera had a loyal following with the original Quinta, and as things do, products evolve and we inherently see a V2. And that's where I start to worry. Loved products with a following making a change. In this case, they rebuilt the cabinet so there's not a single parallel wall left inside of it. They bumped up the sensitivity enough that these are noticeably easier to drive, and left everything people already enjoyed alone. This is the Quinta V2, and none of that happened by accident.
The secret to a successful sound system is its cables. At Nordost, innovative design meets precision engineering to make cables that maximize the performance of your system. Hear what your components are capable of with Nordost cables.
So a little background first, because it explains a lot of how these sound. Opera is an Italian company. They've been building speakers since the late 80s. The Quinta sits in what they call the Classica line, which is their more accessible tier. But the V2 here, this is more so their flagship of that tier. It's not the budget option wearing a nice suit. In this case, it happens to be the top of that particular ladder. The finish options are going to be cement gray or rosewood on the side panels. Rosewood is what you're looking at here, and it's a genuinely good-looking speaker. The front, top, and back aren't a painted MDF like you'd normally see on a speaker at this price range. They're wrapped in a leather-like finish, which is this kind of detail that changes how substantial these feel the second you pull them out of the box and actually touch them. And then down at the base here, Opera redesigned the feet for this generation too. These aren't the run-of-the-mill simple spikes that you just thread into the bottom of your speakers. You get a touch more substance and design with this one. They've got a real heft to them when you look at it, even when you pull it out of the box. I mean, these are a serious bass. And once that bass is assembled and the spikes are threaded into it, the whole speaker feels very rooted. It's very stable on your floor. It's planted and it's just very secure. So here's what actually changed on these. The old Quinta sat around 87 to 88 dB sensitivity. That's fine, but it is treading into the waters of needing more so like a serious amplifier behind it to really open things up. The V2 sits at 91 dB, so what you're getting is a speaker that comes alive with way less amplifier than before. So you're not going to need a monster amplifier to pair with these, and that is a big deal if you're not trying to build a 5-figure electronics chain to go with a pair of tower speakers. And it goes beyond the cost too. This is just going to open you up to a much larger catalog of amps to choose from. Basically, it comes down to more compatibility between devices and just opens you up to a whole world of selections here as far as amplifiers. Getting these out of the box tells you something too. These aren't wrapped in vinyl. They're not slapped together with laminate that looks great from 6 feet away, but it kind of falls apart under the fingernail test. The rosewood finish on my review pair has actual grain variation from panel to panel. That's what happens when you're not printing the same pattern onto every cabinet that rolls off the line. Corners are tight, the binding posts feel substantial, and the base plates add enough footprint that these aren't going anywhere once they're positioned. It feels like someone came in with a furniture design background and implemented it into a speaker. These have a really nice look. The choices of materials and how they blended them together. It's a really nice package when you have these in your room. They don't stand out too much, but they stand out just enough that you can really appreciate the look here. Under the hood, it's a 3-way design, 2 7-inch aluminum drivers, a 6-inch fiberglass mid-range, and a 1-inch soft dome tweeter. All of it's developed with ScanSpeak, so this isn't Opera just pulling off-the-shelf catalog parts and kind of making it fit into a box. These are custom drivers built specifically for this cabinet. And then flipping it around, you're going to find 2 rear-facing ports to assist with the low end, and the frequency response is a very capable 42 Hz up to 28 kHz. The cabinet on these is where you're going to find a lot of the engineering. I would say it's very much so the key to this V2 design. The internal walls aren't parallel, and that sounds like it's more like a looks or design choice, but really it goes far beyond that. Parallel walls inside of a speaker cabinet create standing waves. Standing waves color the mid-range in ways that you can hear even if you can't really name what's going wrong. Opera shaped the inside of this box specifically to reduce those reflections before they can bleed back through the cone. It's the kind of detail you're only going to notice in the shape of the cabinet, which is great. The enclosure has a really nice look, but the unseen performance improvement lives in the mid-range, and it's one of the multiple steps they took to improve the V2. The crossover points on this one sit at 250 Hz and 2300 Hz. It uses Vichy resistors and Mundorf capacitors. which is a very good sign on paper. But what I actually appreciate is that Opera said they voiced this by ear rather than chasing measurements on a graph. I do get that. I coach track on the side, and splits on a stopwatch only tell you part of the story. Sometimes an athlete's mechanics look completely different than the number suggests, and you adjust based on what you're actually seeing. In the case of these speakers, Opera built to what actually sounded correct in the room instead of settling for like a textbook flat response and just calling it a day. The impedance on these is a nominal 6 ohms with a 4.3 ohm minimum. Power handling runs from 25 watts up to 150. Combine that with the low phase rotation Opera engineered into the crossover, and an amplifier never has an ugly load to deal with. That's part of why the sensitivity gain actually matters once you get these home. A speaker can be sensitive on paper and still be kind of miserable to drive if the impedance curve dips and swings all over the place. This one doesn't do that.
Enhanced power means enhanced sound. QRT is the solution. From power supplies to ground boxes to network switches and more, QRT products redefine the art of clean, dynamic power. Nordos QRT, where power meets purity.
So how does this actually sound? Here's the actual job when I sit down with a pair of speakers, and it's the same job every time. I'm not stacking this against some other box that I liked 6 months ago. I'm stacking against the real thing, the reference of an actual instrument in an actual room. That doesn't change no matter what I reviewed the week before. Everything below is measured against our absolute sound reference. The first thing I'm listening for is whether anything's sitting between me and the performer. You know the difference between hearing someone actually play in front of you versus just hearing a recording of it. Run some Camp or Pearl Jam through the Quinta V2s and the vocals sit right there, textured and forward. Nothing smearing the picture here. A lot of the traces back to the non-parallel cabinet work. Most speakers at this price are quietly fighting the internal reflections. This one already won that fight before the music got anywhere near your ears. Imaging is next. Once I had these placed correctly, the stage between the towers went wide and specific instead of blurring together. On a good acoustic recording, you can point to exactly where the guitar sits and where the vocals sit. And that's not an accident on these. That's the same crossover network doing double duty here. And bass is where I want to slow down for a second because most people judge bass by how much of it there is. And that's really the wrong question. The right question is whether you can actually hear the shape of the note instead of just feeling this rumble. The dual woofers here are built for control, not just this chest thump. On rock recordings with real low end, the notes stay separate from each other instead of piling into just this long smear, and that matters more than raw output ever will. And dynamics isn't the same thing as loud. It's the gap between the quiet part and the loud part, not how loud your average listening level runs. I sat around 75 to 80 dB average through most of this, pushing into the mid 90s I'd say on some of the louder tracks. And with the Quinta V2, it never sounded like it was working to get there. And that ease ties straight back to the 91 dB sensitivity number from the top of this video. It's not just a spec sheet flex, it's why the dynamics don't collapse the second you turn this up. Getting into the top end here, it doesn't add anything that isn't already on the recording, which is a good thing, but it also means it won't flatten a bad one. Feed it something compressed or just overcooked in the mastering, and you're gonna hear exactly that. If most of your library is loudness war era rock, that honestly won't always feel like a gift. And then jumping back into the sensitivity, this is the part that actually changes how you shop for this speaker. At 91 dB, you can run these off a genuinely modest amplifier and still get real dynamics and slam. Instead, you really get to shop this space. Most amplifiers, they're gonna be able to handle these, so possibly this could be the speaker upgrade alone, or it could give you an opportunity to try out an amp that possibly didn't have the wattage needed for the last pair of speakers you owned. This is really just a spec that opens the speaker up for a lot of people who would otherwise be priced out of a system that sounds like this. I've realistically had a lot of floor standers and bookshelf speakers come through the room this year, and the pattern I keep running into is just the general trade-off. Either a speaker gives you this big, exciting low end and the mid-range gets a little bit congested when things get busy, or you get a clean, articulate mid-range, and the low end feels like it's just too polite and it's just kind of forgettable. The Quinta V2 doesn't force you to pick a lane here, and not having a glaring weak spot at this price point is something worth commenting on. The price on these is $7,499 a pair in either gray or a rosewood finish. That's real money. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But you are getting custom ScanSpeak drivers in a cabinet engineered specifically to solve a problem most speakers at this price point, they just never even address. You're also getting a company willing to say that a human sat there and tuned this by ear instead of stopping the moment a measurement looked good enough. And I'm not trying to discount measurements here. I really just appreciate that they looked at this from multiple angles and they put out the product that they thought sounded the best. So who should actually buy these? Let's start with your amplifier. If you've got something modest in the 50 to 100 watt range, this is going to be for you. You're not even going to have to make an amp upgrade if you're not looking to do one. If you've been told that you need to double your electronics budget before a good speaker shows you anything, the Quinta V2 solves that problem directly. If you care about vocals and acoustic instruments sounding like the real thing instead of a hyped up version of something, you're going to be right at home here. They do really well at this price point. If you're chasing room-shaking bass over clean mid-range, there's going to be other speakers in this price that are built more for that kind of sound. And you're probably going to be happier with one of those designs if that's the particular sound you want. And I'd also have to say, if your room is on the smaller side, you do need to give these speakers a little bit of space, especially behind them. If you don't have the room for it, you might want to look at Opera's lineup. They have some other options that'll probably work a little bit better if you have to have these closer to the wall. I've reviewed a lot of gear at this price bracket this year, and what stands out with the Quinta V2 isn't just one flashy spec. It's that Opera fixed an actual problem, the internal reflections, instead of just throwing a bigger sensitivity number on a box and calling it a day. The sensitivity number is what gets people curious. The cabinet is why it's actually worth the money. That's the Opera Quinta V2, and if you could, please consider liking and subscribing. Lots of great content on the way. Take care, talk soon, later.